Welcome, everyone, to Beyond Surviving, the safe space for survivors of childhood sexual abuse to receive support, resources, and share their stories. Beyond Surviving is about freedom, healing, connection, and even laughter and fun. Most importantly, it's about letting go of the pain of abuse and finally moving on. I'm Rachel Grant, and for those of you who don't yet know me, I've been a sexual abuse recovery coach since 2007, and am the author of Beyond Surviving, the final stage of recovery from sexual abuse. You can learn more about me and the Beyond Surviving program at rachelgrantcoaching.com. Now, folks, today I'm so excited to have here with me my guest, Kim Warnick. And this lady is up to some really fascinating, interesting stuff out in the world. One of my clients actually connected me to Kim when she learned about and was doing some work for her organization, Calling All Crows. And I immediately reached out and was like, tell me more. I want to learn more about this organization because their focus is really about working with venues, festivals, artists to prevent sexual violence and improve responsiveness to incidents of violence at live music events. Wow, I love that that is out there in the world and that they're taking that on. And so Kim has really stepped into this leadership role at Calling All Crows as the executive director. And she brings with her a decade of sexual violence prevention and response work, in addition to experience in project management and facilitation and crisis management. So she has this amazing skill set that she's able to use to help create conversation and strategy and, oh my gosh, just so much. And of course, she loves music, and so it's a good fit. Her passion for music and her passion to see an end to sexual violence really come together so beautifully in the work that she's doing. So I'm just excited to have her here today to share with you all what this is all about and even how you can get involved and support their efforts. So Kim, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for that lovely intro. I should just carry you around in my pocket.
I'm a good hype woman. Woo! Oh my goodness. So Kim, I really wanted to start out today hearing a little bit more about you and your story and kind of what led you into doing this work with Calling All Crows.
Yeah, so I have been at Calling All Crows on and off since I was a college student. So I sort of stumbled into the organization by going to a concert. I went to a service project that they had before a concert and thought that was so
Mm,
cool to just be combining service and advocacy and music and sort of literally meeting people
yeah.
where they're at, which is at a show. And so I went on as a student to sort of keep working with them part time while I was in school.
Oh yeah.
And in the background, I was on campus. I was a crisis counselor. I was teaching some rape and sexual assault health workshops, and so sort of had both of these tracks that were pretty separate at that point in my life, but they were both pretty big and sort of important parts of my college experience. And I sort of moved on, graduated, went on to work in startups and then a big corporation, and did some other things, um, and found my way back to Calling All Crows in 2017. So I had continued doing sexual violence, more response work at that point, less on the prevention side. So I was doing some, again, crisis counseling, doing some speaking. So I am also a sexual assault survivor, and that's a big part of why I was drawn to this work to begin with. And so I think, and I always like to just sort of name that, being a survivor doesn't make you an expert, and it doesn't require you to have to work in the field.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I find it personally to be empowering and to be a great way to sort of channel some of that trauma into something that to me feels productive and useful, and to sort of tap into the empathy that trauma has
Mm-hmm.
helped cultivate in me, and really
Yes.
build new skills and put some of those like survivor superpowers to use.
I love that.
Yeah, and so So I continued doing this sexual assault prevention and response work. And so in 2017, I rejoined the music industry and had missed it. I had been gone for maybe 3 or 4 years, and it was the place where I loved activism the most. I'm
Mm,
definitely an activist outside of my work life as well, but when it's in combination with something so positive, it's
yeah.
definitely where I feel most at home. And so I came back to calling all pros, and that was when we launched what we call our Here for Music campaign. And so that's the work that you described so beautifully around preventing and responding to sexual violence in the live event space. And so we've been doing that work for a little over 2 years now,
Mhm.
and really, finding ways to partner with the music industry that we're a part of to help improve their safety response and improve their ability to deal with this sort of form of everyday violence that is being done in venues and at festivals.
Mm. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your own story and your own journey. I think it's so true. Those of us who go through trauma, we often feel called to become advocates and step
Mhm.
into work, but not required, folks. You
Yep.
don't have to do that. A really good point to kind of reiterate. And what a fascinating space to really be stepping into, seeing of course this is happening in these sorts of spaces at these venues, and there aren't any structures, there aren't any support systems, just basic education, really, about how to respond and what to do, really lacking. I'm so curious about, the receptiveness. Like, has it been like, knocking down, walls, or have people been fairly open and excited to, be given these tools and these resources? What have you noticed out there? Have you been as you've been doing this work?
Yeah, it's wildly different depending on who you talk to. We've
Mm,
had, and what I'll say, we're a small organization, a small team, and so at this point, we've had sort of been in the position of going for lower hanging fruit.
okay.
So, we definitely have gotten no's or just been ignored by certain companies,
Mm,
but there are enough saying yes that we are able to work with them and start there. So that definitely has been sort of the bright spot of, because we're at the beginning of something new, there aren't very many organizations doing this, not a lot of venues and festivals and artists paying attention to it until recently. We can work with the people saying yes and not yet work on convincing everyone else who's
mm-hmm.
saying no to us. So
Yeah.
um, but in terms of the sort of positive response, I think what's been interesting is we've really put an effort to frame this as a safety issue. So to talk about it not as a women's issue or not as this sort of nonprofit separate thing,
Mm-hmm.
but to say, you're already thinking about safety. If you think about the last concert or festival you went through, you might have had to go through a metal detector. You had your
Right.
bag searched. They have security guards at every entrance and buffering the stage. They have a lot of safety guidance around how stages are built and around alcohol consumption. And they prioritize safety in a lot of ways in that
Yeah.
industry. This is a huge gap. And by framing it that way of saying you already are experts at safety,
Yeah.
many festivals now have active shooter protocols. And we're like,
I was gonna
that's
say, like, they don't
great.
they have protocols for things like
Yeah.
that, or like a fist fight or something like
Yeah.
that, so they know, like, if this starts to
Totally.
happen, this is the immediate response, what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, you have you have safety experts on your team already. You
Yeah.
know how to think about these things. And oftentimes you're planning for sort of extreme, and by extreme, I mean like not frequent. So, unique maybe forms of violence, like an
Mhm.
active shooter or a tornado hitting your festival or things like this. Um, what about this more everyday form of violence that you're seeing in your venues, right? And we know that, and we know that anecdotally by every time we do a training with venues, we hear stories of what they've seen. They're not surprised by this. They're not saying, oh, this
Yeah.
doesn't happen here. They're saying we don't know what to do. But also we've done some surveying to get a sense of people's experiences at live events, and it's definitely people are having really negative traumatic experiences at these events. And so that has been the framing that we've used, and people have been pretty receptive to that, of saying,
Mhm.
oh, you're right, this is a gap. How do we fill it?
Thank you for that. I think it's a really beautiful thing to be noticing, hey, this is happening. You have these other systems already in place. So how can we carry that over? What are the nuances? What are the differences for
Right.
addressing this type of assault or this type of safety issue? But getting people curious and interested. And I was actually going to ask, have you heard stories? Do people share about experiences that they've had where they've just kind of not known what to do in that moment? And we know for people who've just experienced an assault, that could be just another layer of trauma that gets added into the bucket, right? When people don't know what to
Yeah.
say and what to do.
Yeah, we definitely do. I mean, this is a moment where I'm so glad as like someone who's a little bit more focused on the prevention side that I have response training. I think it's just really important for anyone doing
Yeah.
this work. I
Yeah.
mean, you just can't, well, I mean, you can, but you once you start talking about sexual violence, the stories pour in. You become a safe person to talk to, and
Hmm.
having the skills to be able to respond healthily and helpfully to those people, but also to take care of yourself. I mean, I think that I don't know how I would do this work if I didn't myself go through therapy and like really have the skills um, to understand secondary trauma. But
Hmm.
to your question, yes, we do hear those, and I think one of the pieces we incorporate into our training is how to respond compassionately. And we're not turning security guards and bartenders into counselors. In fact, we're reminding them that they're not counselors and to not
Right.
take it on. Right,
Yeah.
to say like, hey,
Right.
this is not your job and you need to hold a professional boundary,
Yeah, because I
because
bet
this
that's one of the biggest concerns, right?
yeah,
Like, oh, now I've got to like really see this person all the way through, or now I'm responsible,
totally.
or
Yeah, it's a big concern. So it's a fear for some people, right, of being like, well, I'm not equipped to do that. And then for others who are, very kindly and compassionately trying to be as helpful as they can, they get in too deep, that they're not actually either not equipped to deal with it because they don't have the skills, or they're just overstepping a different boundary, right? That this
yeah,
person didn't come to report it to you because you're their best friend. They came to report it to you because they think it's your job.
right.
Right. And so if you start going really personal or try to give them a hug or do these different things, that it can be a whole new boundary violation for someone. So it's both directions of people who
Um,
are afraid of like, I don't know what to do, what am I supposed to do, and those who sort of go too personal in their response.
Interesting. Ooh, I like that. That's really helpful. It's interesting to think about those two ends of that spectrum
Hmm.
because I hadn't really thought about what if somebody just
Yeah.
does jump right in and then all of a sudden
Hmm.
it's like overwhelming and too much for the person as opposed to light
Yeah.
support. It's almost like incorrect or inappropriate support.
Yeah.
What Let's get into the nitty-gritty because I know for those so for some of our listeners, they might be in these sorts of roles or they're just
Mhm.
out in their life and they might have occasion to come upon or experience somebody, coming to them for support like this. What are some of the, things that you teach people to say and to do? What are some of those parameters? I know you can't get it all in the time that we have here today. So these are like, just like little mini tips like if nothing else, do this.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you'd like to share around that?
Yeah, also we do work on the prevention side and on the response side. So I'll give a little tip on each of those.
Great.
So on the prevention side, we talk about being active bystander. So not necessarily talking about if this is your literal job, but just if you're someone who's witnessing something that's potentially harmful, you right, like your like attention goes up. What can you do?
Mm,
And so we have what we talk about as the 5 Ds of intervention. So you can be direct, which is exactly what it sounds like. Go directly address it.
yeah.
um, you can create a distraction, and this is one of my favorite ones.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, as so that's the one I'm going to talk about more. It's really like when you, particularly when you're not involved, right? Like you do not know the people involved, you don't have full information for what's going on, you just sense that something's not quite right.
Yeah.
um, Not directly addressing it can actually be safer for everyone involved, for yourself but also for the people there. Because again, you don't have full information, so you might be making some assumptions. You might maybe it's a domestic abuse situation, you really don't want to escalate that. So going in and just
Mm,
interrupting what's happening just gives someone a minute to like regain their sense of self and to sort of be brought back to their body if they were starting to dissociate or whatever it is. And you just create an out for someone, right? So it could be as simple as going over, I think, we talk about this at live events. An easy one is, hey, could you take a photo of me, right?
Oh,
Because
nice.
that
Yeah.
sort of, and it takes a little bit longer and it requires someone to physically move.
Right.
So it's like, hey, here's my phone. Can you take a photo of me over, by the stage, or, just with your friend close by. Don't make them go too far away.
Yeah.
And if it was a dangerous situation, that gives someone a good amount of time to walk away safely.
Mm-hmm.
Or, when they're over there, they might say to you, oh, thanks so much for stopping over. But they also, maybe you misread the situation and they might just go right back and like continue on. And like,
Right.
maybe it was a totally normal fight for them and not dangerous. So a distraction is a great way to insert yourself into a situation, but without directly addressing it. You can also just go over and say like, where's the bathroom? You don't have to be that quick on your feet to
Right.
come up with a distraction. I always have, where's the bathroom in my back pocket?
That's a good one. Yeah.
Because again, it's just enough time to sort of like get someone
It's
to
a
realize like, oh,
disruption.
you're not
Yeah.
alone, and
Yep.
there are other people and there are eyes on you, and it's okay.
Beautiful. Oh, that's
Yeah,
so
so that's
interesting. Okay.
yeah, so that's on the prevention side. Those were two of the D's. The others, just so you know, are to delegate to someone else. So maybe you're not the best person, but maybe you can
Mm-hmm.
find their friend and send them over. And delay. So to delay is like waiting until the situation has passed and then checking in on them afterwards, which can be
Okay.
really powerful. I think about that a lot with like catcalling, for example.
Yeah.
It's such a fast incident that you might not actually be able to interrupt it at all.
Yeah.
But you can still go over and say like, hey, are you okay? Like I saw that. Are you doing okay?
Oh,
So those are the D's of prevention. But on the response side, again, it's going to depend on who you are, what skills you have, but also your relationship to the people involved. But say it's someone it's an acquaintance, right? Like maybe not your best friend, but someone who's not just a total stranger. If you witness something and you're right nearby, or they sort of turn to you and are like sort of seem distressed by some event, and it might be catcalling, it might be groping, it might just whatever it is that they're feeling sort of shaken by. I
yeah.
think what we try to remind, right, you as a listener and a supporter is, one, just sort of hear them, right? Like, listen to where they're at and don't try to fix it. Like your job is not a fixer. And like the
Yeah.
thing you can do best is like be present with them in that moment and validate their experience and ask what they might need.
Mm.
Um, Sometimes asking what someone needs can be really overwhelming if they're like super stressed out, like and like
Right.
really, really frazzled, can sometimes actually be overwhelming. So just saying like, hey, do you want to take 3 deep breaths together can be a great way to help ground someone. But if they seem sort of like with it, not really frazzled, saying like, hey, when you feel stressed, what's helpful for you? Do you have a
Hmm.
friend nearby that I can
Great
help
way.
you find?
Yeah.
Really, again, it's just super simple stuff of like, you don't need to try not to fix anything. People
Mm.
seem to want to jump to fixing, and that can often feel really invalidating or like overwhelming.
Right.
And instead just like helping them meet their need in that moment so that they can figure out how to fix it. If they want to report it to someone, if they want to go ask for help, that
Yeah.
they can have their wits about them and do that themselves.
Thank you.
Mm.
That's an interesting thing because, I see this in my online forum, right, in my Healing from Sexual Abuse Facebook group, that people will talk sometimes about like this just happened. It's very
Mm.
rare that people are coming into that particular community, but it does. And it is interesting how people will jump on and be like, okay, so you're going to go report it, right? I'm like, whoa, like
Yeah.
brakes, hold on.
Yep.
Like they haven't even processed like what's
Mhm.
happened and how they're feeling and what they need. So I think that's a really beautiful guidance there. Like help them really just attune to what they need in that moment, check
Mhm.
in, be a grounding presence for them, and help ask questions that will help them, connect into what they need.
Mhm.
Awesome. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want us to talk a little bit more about the sexual assault spectrum, because I'm noticing as we're dialoguing here that I want to clarify that for our listeners. Like, what are we actually looking for out in the
Mhm.
world that we're trying to prevent? So we'll take a quick break and then we'll be back. Have you ever felt like you've tried everything to heal from the pain of sexual abuse, and yet nothing seems to be really helping? Well, one of the reasons why most people struggle to break free from the pain of past child abuse is because the techniques out there are positioned as a one-size-fits-all answer. What I want you to know is that there are actually three distinct phases on the path to recovery. And I'd love to share with you about these phases, what issues you must resolve to move to the next phase, and what kinds of support you'll need in order to move forward as quickly and completely as possible. The road to recovery is much easier when you know what stage you're in and what to do next. So don't hesitate. Go to rachelgrantcoaching.com/checklist and get your 9-page guide today. Now back to our show. Welcome back. Okay, so Kim, I'm noticing as I'm listening to you that you're describing a variety of things that we might be seeing out in the world. And I want to bring it certainly in the context of being at a concert, being at a live venue, but also just as you've mentioned, like out on the street, things are happening
Mhm.
around us. And you've mentioned things like, well, catcalling or somebody, seeming to be maybe being touched inappropriately. Because when we started this conversation, I myself was kind of holding in my head the most extreme cases. I don't even know if I like saying it that way. The spectrum of experience, right? So we
Mhm.
have, somebody who is raped, somebody who is sexually assaulted at a venue, and then there are people who experience catcalling, and all of that matters. All of that matters and has an impact. And so I think it's good for us to open up the conversation to make sure that we're thinking about it all. And maybe it's just for me. Maybe everybody else was already thinking, but could you speak to that a little bit? Because I think it is helpful to just name like these are the things that count, to pay attention to and to be looking for.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I love that. Yeah. So we intentionally really talk about sexual violence as opposed to sexual assault, because of that all of those things that we've been talking about, violence, right? Like catcalling is violence,
Yeah.
harassment is violence, whereas sexual assault is sort of a specific legal definition. We're talking about this. We're talking broadly about a spectrum of violence, and part of the reason we do that is because well, all of it matters, as you said, right? Like all of those things will have varying levels of impact on the individual who's it's being done to, right? So
Yeah.
for one person, you know, being groped by a stranger in a crowd could be like a brush on the shoulder, right? Like that it doesn't actually
Mm,
impact them. And that's okay. They're allowed to not be impacted by it. Whereas another person might, be sort of harassed by someone verbally, walking by, and
right.
that could really, really deeply hit them and impact them. And it's okay. Like there's not a right response to things, and we're not ranking like we're not in the trauma Olympics here. We're not trying to choose
Thank
who's
you.
the winner.
Yes, exactly.
um,
I always say in my program, trauma is not a competition.
yeah.
Okay, we're not keeping score. You don't
Right.
get more points.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's there's no point system here. But we do think it's useful to use a continuum and to think about it as a spectrum, because from like abusers perspective, like people tend to like dip their toe into violence, so they don't go straight to rape. That's not really like the way that works, especially in an event space. So
Yeah.
someone might, start with something that's sort of non-mutual, but not yet physically aggressive and maybe not repetitive, right? So a cat call, for example. So sort of,
Mhm.
or buying someone a drink, but like not talking to them at all, or really like it's not flirting. It is very much just sort of like this thing, or it's bad flirting, and they then persist, right? Something that's
Right.
non-mutual might be their dipping, where they dip their toe in, and then if they get away with it, right? If no one says anything, no one blinks an eye, oh, that was totally fine. They might step up their game to persistent harassment. So persistent, saying like, oh, like not taking no for an answer. Like, why won't you take the drink? Like,
Right.
why are you being
Come on
like,
already.
blah, blah,
What's your
blah, like,
problem?
take the
Yeah.
drink. What's your
Just
problem? Right.
relax. All that great stuff.
Yeah. Like, it's just
Yeah.
fun. We're at a show. Right. And then if that, right, gets no response from anyone, everyone's just sort of looking away or ignoring it. They're like, cool, I can do that here too. Great. Like, let's see what else I can do. And then they might step up their game to physical touching, or like verbal threats, right? Like not just sort of like pushing someone, but actually threatening them. Like, oh, if you don't do this, then like, I'm going to go, like, I'm not going to leave you alone, or I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
follow you even if you try and leave.
Mm.
Right. Like, so stepping up to either threats or actual touching. And if that, it's like, oh yeah, I can do that here. Like, no one's might again up their game even if they're to assault.
Right.
And that's not always done on the same person either, right? Like they might test
Mm.
something in one area of the bar and then go to the other side of the bar and test something else. So
Interesting.
those are
Yeah.
all things that people are sort of testing the environment for what is possible. It's not always logical, but it there is that stuff like, can we get away with in a specific space? And yeah, so this might not just be with one person, but they might actually, it's really more about testing the entire environment, right? So it's not about that
Right.
individual's response. Is that person going to push back? But is this space going to push back?
Right.
Is this environment going to let me do this here? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's sort of what we try to think about is what is allowed in this environment and where are
Right.
we holding the line? Because for
So
many
that,
people, yeah,
oh, go ahead. For many
I was gonna
people.
say for many people, I mean, I think they sort of like logistically, or if they're being honest with themselves, the line at rape, right? That like
Mm.
many people when they're hearing something don't actually step in. They're sort of
Right.
waiting until it becomes crystal clear and on the way far end of the spectrum that's when we feel sort of comfortable and confident stepping
Mm.
in and saying like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you can't do that. But we need to hold the line a lot sooner, right? And
Yeah.
so, and it can be using those other methods, right? It doesn't always have to be direct. It can be distraction of going
Mm-hmm.
in, but we see those initial warning signs of like, oh, there's some non-mutual behavior going on here.
Yeah.
That's where we need to start holding the line. And again, when I say holding the line, that doesn't mean you have to bounce everyone out of a venue or arrest, we're not arresting them or doing anything. We're
Mm-hmm.
just interrupting that behavior and saying, hey,
Yeah.
like, please don't do that, giving feedback that that behavior is not okay. If it becomes repetitive or if it moves further down the spectrum, that's when you start thinking about some sort
Mm.
of discipline, right?
Right.
Giving a warning, kicking someone out, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But for a lot of it, it's just that sort of feedback, like, hey, please don't do that here, or or
Mm.
we'll need to take further action.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for exploring that further. I think that it's a really important aspect of what we're talking about. And I love the idea of that it's both community, like as people, lay people, if you will, are more aware
Mhm.
and feel more confident and comfortable using these tools, that they can hold that line, as you say. But also, certainly, we're looking to the people who are running the venue to be aware and be present and be
Mhm.
willing to step in. So, I get really excited by, imagining that there's, going to be, as you all at Howling All Crows continue to reach other venues and speak to more and more people, that this can become, just a way that people think about how to create safety, another layer of that in these spaces. So, as we begin to near the end of our conversation today, I could really talk to you for hours about this. I want to talk a little bit more about Calling All Crows and what you're up to these days. I know you have some campaigns happening and want to talk about how people can, volunteer and reach out and support the work you're doing. So, tell us a little more about that, Kim.
Yeah, so Kyle Crows is a cool organization. So this work that we've been talking about is one of our major campaigns, and we love this work. So our Here for the Music campaign is focused on live events and safety at live events by preventing sexual violence. But as an organization, our broader mission is really to partner with musicians and their fans, and so like music lovers out in the world, and to mobilize those communities towards community change. We work mostly on issues affecting women. That's like incredibly broad because all issues affect women, but we do try to bring that gender lens to what we do.
Sure.
Flexible. So we're really thinking about, how do we organize all of these people who are gathering in person over something positive, and channel that energy into social change. And so the Here for the Music campaign is a great way to be involved if sexual violence prevention is an issue you're passionate about, which I would imagine many of you are, tuning in. And so we have volunteers who help with, we'll be at festivals or at concerts and have people there who are doing education and awareness. So it's not that we're asking you to go be security guards. It's that you might be at a table sort of talking to people about these types of intervention strategies and building that awareness. So that's one great way to be involved. And then our other campaigns right now are major focus around mass incarceration and really
Mm.
trying to sort of the US has a wildly out of
Yeah.
control prison and jail population. We just lock people up willy-nilly, and so we're really working on decarceration in the US, which particularly in light of a global pandemic, that becomes incredibly important that
Yeah.
these folks not receive death sentences and, might by virtue of being locked up for, not showing up in court or not being able to pay bail, they could die in
Mhm.
jail. And so that work is something we're also working on. And so if when this airs, hopefully we're soon to be
Oh my
out
goodness.
of
Yes.
lockdown, but
Fingers
I don't
crossed.
know that we will be. So we've been doing these sort of live streams and directing people towards action. So that's a great way to
Wow.
virtually get involved.
Yeah.
But once we're back and tours and festivals are back up and running, there are opportunities to get involved with our work on that campaign and other campaigns as well. So all of that you can find at callingallcrows.org and on our social media. So particularly our Facebook page has been full of live streams during this lockdown. So
Nice.
yeah, so that's the best way to sort of hear more about our work and to get involved in it.
Okay. I love that. And are you located in a particular area in the state, in the world? Are you all over? Where can people expect to find these opportunities to volunteer?
Yeah, so our home base is Boston, but we work nationally. So we occasionally work internationally, but those are pretty rare instances for us. So we're in the US. Um, Anywhere there are major music venues is sort of where we'll be
Hmm.
because we work directly with musicians' tours. So if they're coming through your city on a tour, you might find us there. But
Yeah.
the cities we work in most and where we have our biggest base of like consistent opportunities are Denver, Colorado, Chicago, Illinois, New England broadly. It's so tiny that our home
Right.
base in Boston can cover all of New England. And then Washington, D.C., and we'll be building out into Nashville next. So if you're in Nashville, we
Nice.
especially want to hear from you because that's where
Yes.
we're building out our next group.
Oh my goodness, that's beautiful. And I hope soon enough you'll be out in San Francisco and I can
Yes.
show up and support and help. We have some great, live festivals that happen every year
Mhm.
out here at Golden Gate Park, just up the
Yes.
street from where I am. And it's beautiful and wonderful. And I know it's all absolutely necessary
Yeah.
that we continue to spread the word about the work that you're doing and it help you all expand. So please, everybody listening, go check out Calling All Crows, spread the word about this organization. Excuse me, spread the word about this organization, let people know. And if you love music and you want to get involved in this conversation about how to both prevent and respond to sexual violence at music venues, live music venues, then please get involved. What a wonderful, beautiful way to contribute and donate your time. So, Kim, any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Just thanks for being here and for listening, and hope that you took something away from this conversation. That's so appreciative for all of you tuning in.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. It was
Yeah,
such a
thank
joy to
you.
have you here. And thank you everybody for joining us and tuning in today. Don't forget to visit rachelgrantcoaching.com to learn more about sexual abuse recovery coaching and explore the other resources available on the site. And please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a comment and a note and then come back next time because we have so much more to share. Until then, take good care of you.